On this Saturday night, the laws of war. Israel launches fresh attacks in Gaza. What this week's international court rulings could mean for its planned offensive in Rafah. Funding for Ukraine. The proposed plan to use frozen Russian assets.
That is the obvious solution here.
Summer holiday uncertainty. From wildfires to hurricanes, how climate change is altering travelers' vacation plans. Plus, freezing and fundraising. This record-breaking ice bath for a good cause.
Global National with Farah Nasser. Reporting tonight, Jeff Semple.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. After another deadly day in Gaza, at least 46 people were killed and 130 injured, according to the Hamas-run health ministry. Israel says it plans to proceed with its planned military operations in the southern city of Rafah. That despite two separate international court rulings this week condemning Israel's actions, as well as the attacks by Hamas. Redmond Shannon reports on what those court rulings could mean for a region at war.
The crowded city of Rafah. Residents want to believe that Friday's International Court of Justice ruling ordering Israel to halt its offensive on the city will make a difference. We hope it is implemented, not only in Rafah but across Gaza, says this woman. But Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's national security advisor says he believes the ruling does not rule out all military operations in Rafah. He suggests the offensive will continue within the scope of international law.
The outrageous decision by the ICC prosecutor.
Earlier in the week, Netanyahu strongly criticized the separate decision by the International Criminal Court to issue arrest warrants against him and Hamas leaders, calling it a moral outrage. The ICC investigates people for war crimes and other crimes. Less than 2/3 of UN members recognize it. The US, Russia, China and Israel do not. But all UN members are automatically parties to the ICJ. That court hears cases against nations. Neither court has direct enforcement powers. The ICC relies on states to make arrests. Russian President Vladimir Putin avoided a trip to South Africa last year over the threat of being detained. An ICJ ruling can be used by individual countries to justify sanctions. But
all of that depends, obviously, on the political will in the situation.
And therein lie the limits of international courts.
We don't recognize the jurisdiction of ICC.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has accepted both court rulings.
Canada respects the court.
Speaking on the West Bloc, the US ambassador to Ottawa refused to criticize Canada for not following Washington.
Every nation must make its own sovereign determinations.
The British government here in London, which, like the US, has a UN Security Council veto, has criticised the rulings of both courts, saying they only serve to strengthen Hamas. Jeff?
Redmond Shannon in London. Thanks, Redmond. And as Redmond mentioned, the International Criminal Court issues arrest warrants for individuals, and that court has now issued warrants against 5 people in the Israel-Hamas conflict. On the Israeli side, it's seeking the arrest of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, accused of war crimes including starvation as a method of warfare and willfully causing suffering and death. The court has also issued warrants for 3 senior Hamas leaders. They are Hamas chief Yahya Sinwar, his top military commander Mohammed Deif, and political leader Ismail Haniyeh. They're accused of extermination as a crime against humanity, murder, and taking hostages, among other serious offenses. The war in Gaza has fueled a surge in hate crimes here in Canada, and police in Toronto are now searching for multiple suspects after shots were fired this morning at a Jewish girls' elementary school. It happened just before 5 a.m. at this school in North York. Police say video shows a vehicle pulling up in front of the school before 2 occupants get out and open fire, causing damage to part of the building. Fortunately, no injuries have been reported. Turning to the war in Ukraine now, that country's military has clawed back territory around Kharkiv, its second largest city, after Russian forces ramped up their offensive earlier this month.
зараз нашим воїнам вдалося взяти під бойовий контроль.
That's Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky saying Ukraine is now back in control of areas in the Kharkiv region following Russia's latest advance. The Russian military stepped up its assault 2 weeks ago, launching repeated strikes on border areas with the stated aim of creating a buffer zone to prevent Ukraine from launching attacks on Russian territory. Right now, Russia controls roughly 18% of Ukraine, all of that territory in the eastern part of the country. And this week's fighting focused around 2 towns near Donetsk and Kharkiv, where relentless Russian airstrikes have hit numerous civilian targets. Today, a Russian strike hit a crowded market and a residential area in Kharkiv, killing at least 6 people and injuring dozens more. Volodymyr Zelensky is calling on Western allies to boost air defenses to keep cities and civilians safe. Today, finance ministers, including our own, wrapped up 3 days of talks in northern Italy, discussing a plan to use frozen Russian assets to fund Ukraine's war effort. As David Akin reports, it's a move that could provide a key financial stream for Kyiv.
Finance ministers of the G7, Canada's Chrystia Freeland included, spent 3 days in Italy's alpine resort town of Stresa grappling with the problem of Russia. Canada has been pushing a plan to use the interest income generated by the $300 billion in Russian financial assets that were seized by the West after Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, and either give that interest income directly to Ukraine or use it as collateral against a loan for Ukraine. Canada's firm position has always been that Russia, the aggressor, must pay for the destruction it has caused. Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland told reporters it cannot be the sole duty of the democracies or of the brave people of Ukraine to pay for Putin's war of aggression. The plan could give Ukraine as much as $50 billion, which it urgently needs.
We've been all collectively, demonstrating, screaming, protesting, pleading with our government and with governments around the world who are supportive of Ukraine to do more, but to do it quickly, because I think the situation is deteriorating day by day.
U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen supports the idea, but other G7 finance ministers say there are some tricky technical and legal hurdles that need to be cleared first. And on top of that, each of the European Union's 27 countries would have to sign off on any plan that would see Russia's financial assets used to help Ukraine.
It's obscene that, Russia has these, billions and more of assets that are sitting, earning interest, and that is the obvious solution here.
G7 leaders, including Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, will be back in Italy early next month, where they are expected to finalize any plans to provide financial help to Ukraine. As for Russia, its finance minister had a warning for the West. If Russian financial assets are used to help Ukraine, it is prepared to seize Western financial assets in its jurisdiction. David Akin, Global News, Ottawa.
As Russia's war rages on, pressure is mounting for Canada to meet its NATO commitment on defense. This week, nearly 24 U.S. senators signed a rare bipartisan letter urging Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to live up to this country's pledge of spending at least 2% of GDP on defense. The U.S. ambassador to Canada told our Ottawa bureau chief, Mercedes Stephenson, that sentiment is spreading in Washington.
I'm wondering if the White House shares the view of these U.S. senators that Canada is not doing enough on defense.
Well, I think the U.S. government position, including the White House, is that Canada needs to spend more money on defense. At the end of 2024, the way projections are looking, Canada will be the only country in NATO that is not spending at least 2% of its GDP on defense and does not have a plan to get there. And that "and" is very important. So that Canada's has moved within NATO from being a bit of an outlier to being the outlier in the entire alliance.
And you can watch Mercedes Stephenson's entire interview with the ambassador. That's tomorrow morning on the West Block, right here on Global. In Papua New Guinea, crews continue to dig through the aftermath of a major landslide on a remote village yesterday, burying more than 300 people as they slept. So far, just 4 bodies have been found, according to media reports, but authorities expect the death toll to grow much higher as search efforts continue. In the meantime, emergency relief convoys are bringing aid to survivors, but there are challenges there too. The landslide ended up blocking a main highway, while local food and water sources have also been destroyed. Back in Canada, after last year's historic wildfire season, parts of the country are now on edge for what might lie ahead this summer. This map shows the current situation across the country, with high to extreme fire danger conditions looming over a large chunk of the Northwest. According to the Canadian Interagency Forest Fire Centre, there are now 99 wildfires burning nationwide. And with summer just about to get started, there are questions over how a changing climate will impact Canada's tourism industry. Kyle Benning reports.
Rediscover your wonder.
Views of the Canadian Rockies can bring the wonder to a vacation in Western Canada. But Alpine Helicopters says last year's record-breaking forest fire season held a large impact on one part of its business.
It can work out to be like sort of 50 flights that we may have to cancel on a busy day.
Given how widespread fire and smoke traveled in 2023, industry leaders are looking to ensure tourists that Canada is the place to visit this summer. The Tourism Industry Association of Canada says while fires can limit scenic views, the size of the country means tourists have options.
And to really understand what the impacts of smoke might be on the jurisdiction that you're traveling to within the country.
Earlier this month, Destination Canada released a new strategy to increase Canada as a top global tourism location. The World Economic Forum's Travel and Tourism Development Index lists Canada as the 11th best nation. And as visitors consider wildfires, particularly out west, some businesses have still not seen figures return to previous peaks.
We saw in 2023 that visitation to the province was about 6% shy of where it was in 2019 pre-pandemic levels.
Ambassadeurs runs in the maritime provinces and says advanced sales this summer are up around 12%. But with forecasters projecting 4 to 7 major hurricanes this season, and last summer seeing wildfires impact Nova Scotia, customers and operators may need to consider options with flexibility.
It's part of the fallout from smoke being in the area. What we tend to find though is we try and reschedule people to a different day, hopefully if the smoke clears.
Kyle Benning, Global News.
Record-breaking heat coming up, where scorching temperatures are making homes uninhabitable. In India, more than 25 people are dead, including children, after a fire burnt down a gaming arcade at an amusement park. That fire is now under control and search and rescue efforts are underway. The cause of the blaze is under investigation, but police already say they plan to file a negligence case against the park's owners. Hundreds of people across South Asia are grappling with a prolonged, intense, and dangerous heat wave. In India, elections officials have been drinking special rehydrating salts to stay hydrated in the near 50-degree heat. Today, millions of people cast their ballots in the second-to-last round of voting in national elections there, which the Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, and his BJP party are widely expected to win. That heat is also making life unbearable across much of Pakistan. South Asia is no stranger to high temperatures, but as Eric Sorensen reports, extreme weather fueled by climate change is testing the boundaries of what people can tolerate.
It is a hot wind that blows in Jacobabad, Pakistan, sometimes called the hottest city on earth. The temperature forecast near 50 Celsius, about 120 degrees Fahrenheit. It's like the desert, only people live here. It is very hot, he says, and we are without power many hours a day. In Lahore, 11 million people are sweltering under increasingly dangerous heat. Work goes on, but doctors warn of heat stroke and other health issues. I soak this cloth on my head, I drink water, I work earlier in the morning, says this laborer. This man says the heat is so intense he has to come inside after 10 minutes. They must work, say these laborers, to feed their families. They're accustomed to extreme heat, but not this.
46 degrees centigrade.
Temperatures in the mid-40s in Punjab are 6 to 8 degrees higher than usual, says this meteorologist, and no rain is forecast, so it will remain hot. One climate scientist says areas of South Asia and Southeast Asia are experiencing a new normal, where periods of extreme heat and humidity may be uninhabitable.
The intensity of the long period of hot weather, I think we'll have to make sure that people know about the risk.
In India, the drought is using up groundwater that could cause persistent crop failures, a potential disaster for a country so dependent on farming.
Increasing temperatures lead to more evapotranspiration and lack of water availability. And the frequency and the intensity of these droughts is expected to increase.
Back in Pakistan, the government in Punjab is closing schools this week. Everyone is suffering, says the shopkeeper, especially children and the sick. Health officials say people should stay inside and not travel, as millions who've done little to contribute to global warming must ride out extreme heat waves that are likely to get worse with climate change. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
In Chile, a firefighter and forestry worker have been arrested on suspicion of starting that country's deadliest wildfire back in February. The two men have been charged with arson causing death. Officials say several fires were lit simultaneously and materials used to ignite the blazes were found at one of their homes. 137 people were killed and more than 1,000 homes wiped out as towering flames took hold during an extreme drought. Still ahead, overdose training, how a tragic death could bring changes to British Columbia's high schools. Welcome back. Health Canada is recalling a drink tumbler after at least 43 people got sick. 33,000 tumblers were given out for free over the last month to customers who bought 12 and 15 packs of neutral seltzers. Health Canada found a chemical solution containing sulfuric and phosphoric acid can leak out of the inner walls of those tumblers. Symptoms include burns to the throat and stomach, nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. A recent drug poisoning death at the University of Victoria is sparking calls for British Columbia to make CPR and naloxone training mandatory in BC high schools. A coroner's inquest was called this week into the death of 18-year-old Sydney McIntyre Starko back in January. Her parents say the tragedy was preventable and they want the province to take action. Neethu Garcha reports.
Her story, a chilling reminder of the perilous grip of the toxic drug crisis. 18-year-old Sydney McIntyre Starko died in hospital in January after a cardiac arrest due to fentanyl poisoning in a dorm room, according to her parents.
You're heartbroken that anybody else has had to go through the same heartache.
John and Jennifer Akin lost their 26-year-old son Ryan 7 years ago to fentanyl poisoning. They're advocating for accurately labeling the deaths as a result of a poisonous drug supply rather than individual choices.
What killed Sydney, what killed Ryan, and the vast majority of those that we've lost is the toxic supply of drugs.
Mental health and drug awareness advocate Shadia Dodi, who lost her brother to the drug crisis in 2016, is focused on increasing access to a medicine capable of reversing the effects of overdose.
I feel like naloxone should be in every kid's backpack at every party that they go to.
McIntyre Starko's death has sparked a reassessment of policies regarding access to naloxone on post-secondary campuses.
It's happening right across Canada in all walks of life.
McIntyre Starko's family started a website. Using 911 call recordings, they detail the timeline of the death of the first-year science student and explain why they claim overwhelming failures contributed. The student responders had no access to naloxone in the dorm. In a statement, the University of Victoria said the security officers followed the protocols of their first aid training. These efforts didn't save Sydney's life, but they did save the life of another student that night.
There are serious questions that need to be answered about this horrific death.
The province said it's looking to purchase larger quantities of nasal naloxone, which is easier to administer than injectable naloxone. And it's in discussions about adding CPR training as a mandatory lesson in high school.
Even if someone were to take one hand on top of the other hand, find the center of a victim, a person's chest, and just do what we call compression-only CPR, they're going to make a difference.
As McIntyre Starko's story resonates, it's renewing calls for action to implement life-saving measures. Neethu Garcha, Global News, Vancouver.
Up next, neck deep in ice. This extreme athlete's bone-chilling, record-breaking feat. Welcome back. Polar plunges and ice baths are growing in popularity, but one athlete is taking that chilling experience to new heights. In Calgary this week, he looked to set a new Guinness World Record.
All right, here comes the first bag.
That's Andre Bellaby keeping his cool as a team showered him with dozens of bags of ice. The Swiss native submerged up to his neck.
And start the clock.
That clock was ticking to see how long he could last. Now kids, don't try this at home. Bellaby has trained for more than 2 years, involving countless ice baths, kilometers of snow running, and most importantly, he says, hours of mental preparation.
One step at a time, you know, breathing, meditation, relax, accept it. An hour by an hour or 30 minutes by 30 minutes, you know, and yeah, and we're getting closer to the goal.
We're close. We're very close.
That goal, to set a new world record for the longest time spent submerged in ice. And he did it, braving the cold for 4 hours and 6 minutes. A new, albeit still unconfirmed, world record, beating the previous time by a cool 4 minutes.
Hey, buddy, you just broke the world record. What do you got to say?
Oh, I don't know. It's for the good cause. You know what? It's for the good cause.
His cause? Bellaby used the event to raise money for Autism Canada, a tribute to his 12-year-old daughter who was on the spectrum.
And that is Global National for this Saturday night. I'm Jeff Semple. Tonight's Your Canada is Englishman River Falls Provincial Park near Parksville, British Columbia. We love seeing Your Canada, so please keep emailing your photos to viewers@globalnational.com. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you back here again tomorrow. Have a great night.